The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry wasps. The coffee tasted like burnt rubber mixed with defeat. Gray fabric walls surrounded me in a maze of mediocrity that stretched endlessly toward the horizon of corporate hell. "Jenkins, you're pathetic." Marcus Webb's voice cut through the Monday morning silence like a blade through silk. He stood 6'3" in his tailored Armani suit, casting a shadow over my cramped workstation that might as well have been a coffin. 27 years old and still pushing paper and accounting. "My nephew's 12 and makes more money selling lemonade on weekends than you make in a month." The office erupted in laughter that echoed off the walls like gunfire. Sarah from HR covered her mouth with manicured fingers, but her eyes sparkled with the cruel amusement of a Roman crowd watching gladiators bleed. Even quiet Tom from IT, the guy who usually kept his head down and minded his own business, cracked a smile that revealed teeth stained yellow from too much coffee and too little self-respect. I kept my head down, fingers dancing across the keyboard with mechanical precision, entering numbers that meant nothing to anyone who mattered. Asset depreciation schedules, quarterly expense reports, the digital paperwork of a dying economy, shuffled around by people who'd never created anything of value in their meaningless lives. "Look at him," Marcus continued, his voice gaining momentum like a freight train headed for a bridge that was already out. "Probably still lives with his mother in some sad little apartment with water stains on the ceiling. Bet he's never even been in a real fight. Corporate drone, through and through. A ghost who'll never leave a mark on this world." More laughter. Chairs squeaked as people turned to watch the show, their faces lit up with the sick joy that comes from watching someone else's humiliation. I felt their eyes on me, dissecting my cheap button-down shirt from Walmart, my scuffed shoes that had seen better decades, my 5-year-old laptop that wheezed like an old man climbing stairs to nowhere. "You know what your problem is, Jenkins." Marcus leaned against my desk, his cologne mixing with the stale office air to create a cocktail of corporate oppression. "You're invisible. A ghost. Nobody remembers you 5 minutes after you leave the room. You could die tomorrow, and the only way anyone would notice is if the coffee fund ran short." The words hit harder than they should have, each syllable a small knife finding flesh. I saved my spreadsheet a month's worth of work that would be forgotten by Friday and looked up at him for the first time. His face was flushed with the satisfaction of public humiliation well executed, the kind of performance that would be whispered about around the water cooler for weeks. Behind him, 23 co-workers watched and waited for my response like vultures circling roadkill, their faces blurred together into a single mask of anticipation, hungry for whatever pathetic comeback I might offer. "You're right," I said quietly, my voice barely audible above the hum of dying fluorescent lights. "I am invisible." Marcus grinned wider, his teeth perfect and white like a shark's. "Finally some self-awareness. Maybe there's hope for you yet, Jenkins. Maybe you'll work up the courage to ask for a raise sometime before you retire." Outside, a helicopter's rotors cut through the morning air like the sound of distant thunder. The noise grew louder, closer, more insistent. Windows rattled in their frames. The fluorescent lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. Everyone looked up, distracted by the unusual noise cutting through the urban symphony of downtown Austin. The helicopter landed on the roof with a thud that shook the entire building. My challenge coin worn smooth by 8 years of nervous handling against my leg through my pocket, warm as a heartbeat. The Texas heat shimmered off the tarmac at Lockland Air Force Base like liquid mercury, distorting the horizon into rippling waves of possibility. I was 19, fresh out of high school in suburban Dallas. Scared as hell but trying not to show it to the other recruits who looked just as lost as I felt. The drill instructor's voice echoed across the parade, ground like the voice of God himself, breaking down everything I thought I knew about myself and the world. "You think you're special, boy. You think Mummy's little soldier is gonna save the world. You ain't special. You're just another wannabe who's gonna wash out before week 3 and go home crying to your girlfriend." But I didn't wash out. I got stronger, faster, smarter, more dangerous. The scared kid from suburban Dallas transformed into something else entirely. Something that moved through darkness without sound, that could kill without conscience, that could disappear into crowds or wilderness with equal ease. Selection came 2 years later, after I'd proven myself in the regular army. The instructors didn't tell us where we were going or what we'd be doing, just that 90% of us wouldn't make it through the program. Green Team was a blur of sleep deprivation, impossible tasks, and constant evaluation by men whose names we never learned and whose faces we tried to forget. I learned to move through darkness without sound, to strike without warning, to disappear into shadows like smoke. I learned to read people's faces, to predict their movements, to find their weaknesses and exploit them without hesitation. Most importantly, I learned to become invisible when necessary to blend into any environment, any crowd, any situation. Call sign was Ghost. The irony wasn't lost on me now, sitting in this corporate wasteland listening to Marcus Webb destroy what little dignity I had left with surgical precision. But that was the point. That was the cover. Nobody suspects the quiet accountant in the corner cubicle. Nobody looks twice at the guy who brings bag lunches in brown paper bags and drives a 10-year-old Honda with a rattling muffler after 8 years in the teams. I'd had enough of war. Too many friends in flag-draped boxes, carried by honor guards, who'd never known their names. Too many missions that didn't make the news, that never happened according to official records. Too many nights waking up in cold sweats, reaching for weapons that weren't there, calling out names of people who couldn't answer. The transition counselor at the VA hospital in Tampa had been blunt about my prospects. Civilian life's gonna be hard. Sergeant, you're trained to be exceptional, but the world wants you to be ordinary. They want you to punch a time clock and smile when they tell you to smile. Can you do that? I'd thought I could. I'd chosen ordinary. I'd chosen invisible. Until today, when the past came calling with rotor blades and federal badges. The helicopter's engine wound down to a whisper that seemed to fill the entire office with tension. Footsteps echoed in the stairwell. Tactical boots, not dress shoes. Heavy, purposeful, moving with the measured cadence of people who knew how to handle violence. I knew that sound. I'd made that sound 10,000 times. Marcus was still talking, but his voice seemed distant now, like he was speaking from the bottom of a well. My body was shifting gears automatically, old reflexes kicking in like muscle memory that had been waiting years for activation. I felt the familiar tingle in my fingertips, the heightened awareness that came with imminent danger. Sir, I need to speak with David Jenkins. The voice belonged to a woman, crisp and professional with just a hint of Texas drawl. She stood in the doorway wearing a black suit that couldn't quite hide the tactical gear underneath the slight bulge of body armor. The way her jacket hung loose over a shoulder holster, her eyes swept the room systematically, cataloging exits and potential threats with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. That's me, I said, standing slowly, my movements careful and controlled. Marcus stepped between us, puffing out his chest like a peacock trying to impress a predator. Excuse me, lady, but this is a private office. You can't just walk in here without an appointment. We have procedures, protocols. Her badge appeared in her hand like magic, the leather case flipping open with practiced ease. Agent Sarah Chen, FBI. Mr. Jenkins, I need you to come with me now. The office went dead silent. 23 pairs of eyes bounced between the federal agent and the invisible accountant, like spectators at a tennis match. Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air on a dock. Is there a problem, Agent Chen? I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to course through my system. That depends on you, Sergeant. Sergeant. The word hung in the air like a live grenade with a pin pulled. I saw the confusion spreading across familiar faces like ripples in a pond. Marcus looked like he'd been slapped by an invisible hand. I'm not a sergeant anymore, I said carefully, choosing my words like a man walking through a minefield. I'm just an accountant, have been for 3 years. Not today, you're not. Her radio crackled with coded chatter that most people wouldn't understand. We've got a situation downtown. Your particular skill set is required. I looked around the office one last time, memorizing faces that had become as familiar as family over the past 3 years. At Marcus, still frozen in disbelief. At Sarah from HR, her hand pressed to her chest. At Tom from it, his mouth hanging open behind thick glasses that made his eyes look huge. My skill set, I repeated, testing the words, Ghost Team Alpha, Operation Sandstorm. Ring any bells? It rang every bell I had. Sandstorm was classified so far above top secret that most people didn't even know it existed. If Chen was name-dropping it in a corporate office full of civilians, things had gone sideways in a very big way. The radio crackled again. All units, Falcon is airborne. Repeat, Falcon is airborne. 80 to target is 15 minutes. Game time. The helicopter lifted off from downtown Austin with me strapped into the jump seat, the city shrinking below us as we banked east toward the hills. Agent Chen handed me a secure tablet, her fingers dancing across the encrypted display, with the fluidity of someone who'd done this dance before. Marcus Webb, she said, pulling up a file that made my blood run cold. 34 years old, MBA from Wharton, senior partner at Redstone Financial. Also happens to be laundering money for the Kozlov crime family. My stomach dropped. The Russians 50 million in dirty cash, flowing through your company's accounts over the past 6 months. Webb's been using his position to clean it, then funnel it to offshore accounts in the Caymans. But that's not the worst part. She swiped to the next screen, revealing surveillance photos that made everything click into place. All those late nights Marcus stayed at the office, all those client meetings he never talked about, all those snide comments about my simple little life while he was playing with fire. How long have you been watching him? 6 months. Maybe. Longer. We've been building a case, gathering evidence. Then this morning at 0700 hours, our surveillance team went dark. The tablet showed more photos. Marcus shaking hands with a man in an expensive suit outside a warehouse. More photos of the same man, older silverhead with dead eyes that had seen too much violence and felt nothing about it. Dr. Alexei Petrov, Chen continued, former GRU intelligence officer, biochemist, weapons specialist, is not just laundering money. Jenkins is buying components for something much worse. I studied the photos more carefully. The warehouse was on the east side of town, industrial district, good sightlines, multiple exits. The kind of place where people disappeared and were never found. What kind of components? Chemical precursors, lab equipment, the kind of stuff you'd need to weaponize anthrax or smallpox. We think he's building a biological weapon. The words hit me like a physical blow. Chemical weapons were bad enough, but biological weapons were a nightmare beyond comprehension. They could kill thousands, maybe millions, and there was no telling where they might spread. What happened to your team? 3 agents, all experienced. We lost contact at 0700 hours. Last transmission was a panic signal, then nothing. The helicopter banked sharply, and through the window I could see the warehouse complex coming into view. 2 black SUVs were parked outside, along with a white van that looked like it belonged to a catering company. No movement visible, but that didn't mean anything. This is your show now, Ghost, Chen said. You know these people. You know their methods. I did know them. I'd spent 2 years hunting Petrov's network in Eastern Europe, playing cat and mouse through the ruins of the Cold War. They were professionals, ruthless, they didn't leave witnesses, and they didn't make mistakes. I need gear, I said. Chen pointed to a case behind my seat. Everything you requested, plus a few surprises. Inside the case, ceramic plates, tactical vests, suppressed M4 carbine, sidearm, flashbangs, breaching charges, and something I hadn't seen in years, a vial of antidote for a VX nerve agent. Do you think they're that prepared? I think they're ready for war. The warehouse district sprawled below us like a concrete maze designed by someone who hated humanity. I studied the terrain through tactical binoculars while Chen coordinated with ground units, her voice calm and professional, despite the circumstances. Overwatch is in place, she reported. We've got eyes on all exits, but no movement. Rules of engagement. Petrov's people are armed and extremely dangerous. Use your judgment, but remember we need at least one of them alive to tell us where the biological weapon is. I clipped the radio to my vest and checked my weapon with the mechanical precision of someone who'd done this ritual 1,000 times. The familiar weight felt wrong in my hands, like putting on clothes that no longer fit properly, but my fingers remembered the manual of arms, the sight picture, the breathing techniques that could mean the difference between life and death. You don't have to do this alone, Chen said, her voice softer now. I've got a good team out there. FBI hostage rescue team, trained for this kind of operation. How good? Good enough. They're not special forces, but they're solid. They know how to follow orders and how to shoot straight, not special forces. That was the problem. Regular agents, no matter how well trained, weren't built for this kind of work. They followed procedures, called for backup, waited for orders against Petrov's killers that would get them dead in the first 30 seconds. The helicopter settled into a hover pattern 300 meters out. I could see the warehouse, clearly now corrugated metal siding, flat roof, loading docks on the east side, perfect for an ambush, but also perfect for a counter-ambush if you knew what you were doing. Ghost, we've got movement, came a voice over the radio. 3 subjects armed with automatic weapons, moving to defensive positions around the perimeter. I adjusted my scope and caught glimpses through the warehouse windows. Tactical gear, professional movement. These weren't street thugs or amateur criminals. They were soldiers. Chen, pull your people back now. What? Why? Because those aren't just money launderers down there. They're military contractors, probably ex-Spetsnaz or Wagner Group. Your agents are walking into a kill zone. Her face went pale. How can you tell? The way they move. The way they set up their fields of fire. The way they're using the terrain. Your people are good, but they're not good enough for this. The radio crackled with urgent chatter. All units, we have visual on the missing agents. They're zip-tied inside the main building. Appears to be 3 subjects, all breathing, but they look like they've been beaten. Relief flooded through me. They were alive, but for how long? I'm going in, I said. Ghost, wait, but I was already moving, dropping from the helicopter on a fast rope like I'd done 100 times before. The ground rushed up to meet me. The warehouse smelled like oil and rust and something else, fear mixed with a metallic temps of blood. I'd been inside for less than 2 minutes when I realized I'd walked into a trap more sophisticated than anything I'd encountered in 8 years of active duty. The missing agents weren't just prisoners. They were bait, positioned exactly where they needed to be to draw me into the kill zone. Welcome, Ghost. The voice came from the shadows near the loading dock. Cultured and calm with just a hint of Russian accent, Dr. Alexei Petrov stepped into the light, his silver hair gleaming under the industrial fixtures. He looked exactly like his photos, except for the Makarov pistol in his right hand and the slight smile playing around his lips. You know who I am, I said. My weapon trained on his center mass, of course. Prague, 2019. You killed my protege, Dmitri, brilliant young man. He was going to revolutionize biological warfare. Prague. The memory hit me like a physical blow. A rooftop chase through the old city. A sniper's bullet that had found its mark just as the target was about to release aerosolized anthrax into the subway system. A young man who died because he'd chosen the wrong mentor. He was about to kill 10,000 innocent people. I said he was about to change the world. But you Americans, you always think so small. You see only the immediate casualties, not the larger picture. Behind Petrov, 3 more figures emerged from the shadows. Professional operators, just like I'd suspected. They moved with the fluid precision of men who'd been killing for money since before I'd enlisted. Your government friends think they are so clever, Petrov continued, watching Marcus Webb, following the money trail, building their little case like good bureaucrats. But they never suspected the real target, which is Austin, Texas. Population 1 million. Perfect test site for my latest creation. The truth crashed over me like a cold wave. This wasn't about money laundering or financial crimes. This was about biological terrorism on a scale that would make 9/11s look like a warm-up act. You're insane, unpractical. Your country has been meddling in global affairs for decades. Time to show you what real power looks like. I thought about the people in the office building, the way Marcus had humiliated me in front of everyone. They had no idea they were sitting in the crosshairs of a madman who saw them as nothing more than test subjects. The missing agents, alive for now. But their fate depends on your cooperation. You see, I need a demonstration of my weapons' effectiveness, something to show potential buyers that the product works as advertised. Petrov raised his pistol, and behind him, his men shifted positions, creating overlapping fields of fire. I had maybe 3 seconds before they opened up with enough firepower to turn me into hamburger. My hand moved instinctively to my challenge coin, the one I'd carried through 8 years of deployments. The metal was warm against my palm, worn smooth by nervous fingers during 1,000 briefings. You made one mistake, I said. And what is that? You assumed I came alone. The flashbang went off behind them, but something was wrong. The explosion was too small, too contained. One of Petrov's men had spotted the device and kicked it away from the group. Automatic weapons fire erupted from 3 directions at once. I rolled left behind a concrete pillar as bullets chewed up the floor where I'd been standing, sparks flying from ricochets. My radio crackled with Chen's voice, but the words were lost in the chaos. I was alone, outgunned, and rapidly running. Out of options, this was about to get very ugly. The warehouse exploded into chaos that would have made Dante proud. Through the smoke and strobing light, I rolled left behind a concrete pillar as automatic weapons fire chewed up the floor where I'd been standing. My radio crackled with Chen's voice, but the words were lost in the symphony of violence. But I was already moving, flowing between the shadows like smoke. The first contractor went down hard, my suppressed rifle finding center mass before he could reacquire his target. The second spun toward me, his AK-47 chattering death. But I was already gone. Using the industrial machinery as cover while I flanked around to his blind side, Petrov shouted orders in Russian. But his men were trained for conventional warfare, not urban combat against a lone operative who'd spent 8 years learning to be invisible. They bunched up, created fatal funnels, forgot that angles and cover worked both ways. I put 2 rounds into the third contractor as he tried to flank me from the left. He dropped behind a shipping container, his weapon skittering across the concrete. That left Petrov and one remaining shooter, but something was wrong. The math didn't add up. 4 operators was too few for a man like Petrov. He was paranoid, careful, the type who planned for every contingency. This felt like a skeleton crew. You cannot win, Petrov called out from behind his cover. Even if you kill us all, there are others. The weapon is already in position. In 6 hours, your precious city will be ground zero for a new kind of war. 6 hours. I checked my watch. 14:30. That gave me until 2030 to find and neutralize a biological weapon somewhere. In a city of 1 million people. The 4th contractor made his move, rushing my position with his rifle on full auto. I let him commit, then stepped out and put a single round through his chest. He folded like a broken doll, his weapon clattering across the concrete. Petrov was alone now, still holding his pistol, but his hands were shaking. Behind him, the 3 missing agents were zip-tied to chairs, conscious but dazed. They'd been beaten, but they were alive. It's over, I said, my rifle trained on his center mass. No, it is just beginning. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a cell phone. On the screen, I could see a live video feed from the office building, where I'd worked for 3 years. Marcus Webb was at his desk, looking terrified. Standing behind him was another man with a gun pointed at his head. You see, my network extends farther than you imagined. Your co-workers, your innocent civilian friends, they are all part of this now. My blood turned to ice. Sarah from HR was visible in the background, along with Tom from IT and a dozen others. They were hostages, human shields, in a game that had spiraled completely out of control. What do you want? You in exchange for their lives. But more importantly, I want you to deliver a message to your government. Tell them that the age of American hegemony is over. Tell them that the balance of power has shifted. The phone buzzed. A text message appeared on the screen. Roof, 20 minutes, come alone. But there was something else on the screen, a timestamp showing the feed was recorded, not live. The timestamp was from 2 hours ago. Petrov smiled, but it was the smile of a man who'd just realized his perfect plan had a fatal flaw. You're lying, I said. That feed is old. You don't have them. His smile faltered. You cannot be certain. Actually, I can. I set up the security cameras in that building. I know the angle, the lighting, the timestamps. You're bluffing. For the first time, Dr. Alexei Petrov looked genuinely afraid. This office building's roof was exactly as I remembered it, flat, covered in gravel, with a clear view of the city skyline stretching out toward the horizon. But something was wrong. The helicopter that had brought me here was gone, and in its place sat a sleek black aircraft that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. Marcus Webb stood near the edge, his hands zip-tied behind his back, but he wasn't alone. 3 other figures were with him, not Russian contractors, but men in expensive suits who moved with the fluid precision of professionals. "You came," said a voice I recognized but couldn't place. "I was not entirely certain you would." A man stepped out of the shadows near the rooftop access door. Not Petrov, someone else entirely. Someone I'd hoped never to see again. Colonel James Morrison, my former commanding officer. The man who'd recruited me for the teams, who'd trained me, who'd sent me on missions that didn't officially exist. "Hello, Ghost," he said. "It's been a long time, Morrison." The name tasted like ashes in my mouth. I should have known. Should have known what? That I'd find a way to bring you back. That I'd never let my best operator disappear into civilian mediocrity. That you'd turn traitor. His laugh was bitter. "Traitor. I'm a patriot. I'm doing what needs to be done to protect American interests. The old ways don't work anymore. We need new weapons, new strategies. Like biological weapons. Like efficiency, precision, the ability to eliminate threats without the messy complications of conventional warfare." I looked around the roof, taking in the tactical situation. 3 hostiles, plus Morrison. Marcus was alive but terrified. The other figures were too far away to identify, but their body language suggested they were security, not decision-makers. Working for you. Petrov's working for America, whether he knows it or not. His weapon will be used to eliminate terrorist cells, enemy installations, problem populations. Clean, efficient, untraceable, and the test in Austin. A demonstration, a proof of concept. A few thousand casualties to prevent millions more in the future. The words hit me like physical blows. This wasn't about money or revenge or even biological terrorism. This was about a man who'd lost his moral compass so completely that he could rationalize mass murder as patriotism. "You're insane. I'm practical. You taught me that. Ghost, remember what you said after Prague. Sometimes you have to become the monster to fight the monsters. Well, I've become the monster." Morrison raised his sidearm, but I was already moving. The challenge coin flew from my hand, catching the afternoon sunlight as it spun through the air. Not for distraction this time, for something else entirely. The coin struck Morrison's weapon, hand with enough force to knock the gun aside. I followed through with a tackle that sent us both crashing to the gravel surface. His men were already moving, but they were too far away to help. We rolled across the roof, fighting for control of the weapon. Morrison was older than me, but he was still strong, still dangerous. His elbow caught me in the ribs hard enough to crack bone. I drove my knee into his solar plexus and heard him grunt with pain. "You don't understand," he gasped. "The weapon's already in position. Even if you kill me, it won't matter. The timer's already running." "Where?" "Downtown, the federal building, 20 minutes from now, during the afternoon shift change. 3,000 federal employees, plus however many civilians happen to be in the area." I got my hands around his throat, but he managed to break free and roll away. His gun was 5 feet away, but so was mine. We both lunged for our weapons. The shots came almost simultaneously. Morrison's bullet took me in the shoulder, spinning me around. Mine took him center mass, and he dropped to his knees with a look of surprise on his face. "You always were the better shot," he said, then fell forward onto the gravel. I was bleeding, but I was alive. The challenge coin lay on the roof between us, its surface reflecting the afternoon sun like a mirror. 15 minutes to find and disarm a biological weapon in downtown Austin. The federal building evacuation was already in progress when I arrived, clutching my wounded shoulder and trying to look like just another injured civilian. FBI agents and local police had cordoned off a 6-block radius, but I could see the problem immediately. They were looking for a conventional bomb, not a biological weapon. Chen met me at the perimeter, her face grim. "We've got bomb squads on every floor, but they're not finding anything." "Are you sure?" Morrison was telling the truth. He was dying. No reason to lie. I winced as a paramedic examined my shoulder. "It's not going to be obvious. Petrov's too smart for that." "So what are we looking for?" "Something that can disperse biological agents over a wide area, probably connected to the building's ventilation system." We pushed through the crowd of evacuees looking for anything unusual. Federal employees, civilians, tourists, all of them potential victims if we couldn't find the weapon in time. My watch showed 12 minutes until the estimated activation time. That's when I saw him. Marcus Webb, standing near a hot dog cart, talking animatedly on his cell phone. He was supposed to be in FBI custody, but somehow he'd slipped away in the chaos. "There," I said, pointing. "Marcus knows something." We approached him carefully, but he spotted us coming and tried to run. Chen tackled him before he could get 10 feet, and they went down hard on the sidewalk. "Where is it?" I demanded, grabbing him by the collar. "Where's the weapon?" "I don't know what you're talking about." You're working for Morrison. You've been working for him all along. The money laundering, the office humiliation, it was all part of the plan to draw me out. His face crumpled. They said they'd kill my family, my wife, my kids. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. Where's the weapon? The parking garage. Sublevel 3. It's connected to the ventilation intake for the entire building. 8 minutes we raced through the building, past confused security guards and evacuation teams. The parking garage was dimly lit, filled with the usual collection of government vehicles and civilian cars. But in the far corner, near the ventilation intake, I could see something that didn't belong. A white van. The same one from the warehouse surveillance photos. Everyone back, I ordered. This thing could be rigged to explode if we approach it. Wrong, but we didn't have time for a careful approach. 6 minutes until activation. I opened the van's rear doors and found myself staring at a device that looked like a cross between an air conditioning unit and a chemistry set. Tubes, tanks, electronic timers, and in the center a sealed container that probably held enough weaponized anthrax to kill half the city. Can you disarm it? Chen asked. I don't know. I'm not a bomb tech. You're the only one here who's seen this kind of thing before. 4 minutes I studied the device, trying to remember everything I'd learned about biological weapons during my years in the teams. The timer was digital, counting down with mechanical precision. The dispersal system was elegant in its simplicity. When the timer reached 0, explosive charges would rupture the biological container and force the contents into the building's ventilation system. 3 minutes. My hands shook as I traced the wiring. Red wire to the timer, blue wire to the dispersal charges, green wire to the biological container. But which one to cut? 2 minutes. I thought about Morrison's words on the roof. Sometimes you have to become the monster to fight the monsters. Maybe he was right. Maybe this was the kind of world we lived in now, where good people had to make impossible choices. 1 minute. I closed my eyes and cut the red wire. The timer stopped at 047. In the silence that followed, I could hear my own heartbeat and the distant sound of sirens. Chen was saying something, but I couldn't make out the words. The challenge coin in my pocket felt heavier than it ever had before. Is it over? She asked. This part is, but I knew it wasn't really over. There would be investigations, trials, congressional hearings. Morrison's network would be rolled up, but there would be others. There always were. The war never really ended. It just moved to different battlefields. 6 months later, I stood in the VA hospital parking lot in Tampa, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded me of muzzle flashes and burning buildings. The counseling session had gone better than expected. Dr. Martinez was skilled at drawing out the things I'd buried, patient with the silences that stretched between words. You're making real progress, she'd said, but you still seem conflicted about your choices, about whether you made the right decision. She was right. Part of me still wondered if I should have stayed in that cubicle, should have remained invisible, should have let someone else handle the crisis. But another part, the part that had spent 8 years learning to be a weapon, knew that some fights can't be avoided. My phone buzzed. A text from Chen. New case, arms dealer in Miami, international connections. We could use a ghost. I almost deleted it. The shoulder was still healing, and the nightmares had gotten worse since the federal building incident. But my thumb hovered over the screen, and I found myself thinking about the 3,000 federal employees who'd gone home to their families that night, unaware of how close they'd come to dying, about the other networks out there, the other Morrisons who thought they could justify any atrocity in the name of patriotism, about the innocent people who needed someone to stand between them and the monsters. Maybe invisibility wasn't about hiding from who you were. Maybe it was about choosing when to reveal yourself, when to step out of the shadows and into the light. The challenge coin felt warm in my pocket as I walked toward my truck. Not the old Honda. I'd traded that in for something more practical after the insurance settlement. Something that could handle the kind of work I was considering. That at a red light, I pulled out the coin and looked at it. 8 years of service, 23 confirmed kills, dozens of missions that had saved lives, stopped terrorists, made the world marginally safer, but also Prague and Morrison, and the knowledge that sometimes the monsters wore American uniforms. The light turned green. Traffic moved forward like a river of metal and glass, carrying people to jobs they hated, to lives they'd never chosen, to futures they couldn't imagine. I had a choice to make.